amputated people to where they could get back. If they had a badly mangled arm or leg, we just amputated the leg. And, I've walked to the back door of the tent, the operating tent, and just throw a leg with a shoe on it up in a trailer out there, and a raw arm or something like this, because they would have bled to death otherwise.
Yes.
And the doctors would endeavor to amputate far enough that when they were really amputated professionally, or it was professionally, but you get back in a stationary hospital, we call them general hospitals, then where they were going to be for several weeks or months at a time. And
Clean it up a little bit.
so we saw it just as soon as it happened. And then as the front line moved on forward, and we get as much as 4 miles behind here, then another hospital just like us would leapfrog and move up to the front, then a half a mile from the front line. And we were back here then taking the overflow and resting maybe for 2 or 3 days, and then we'd leapfrog that and get on up to the next one. And then I went into administration then, and that was one of my jobs, was to go forward and find a place to set up the hospital. I'm sorry I didn't bring books. I've got books with all those pictures of the hospital set up, all like that.
Now that's a risky proposition, though, to be out that near the front line.
Oh yeah, well, all our tents had big crosses painted on them, red cross painted on them, so the Germans know we were not the combat troops. We were medics.
Did they honor that?
Yes, they always did. Well, in fact, they just didn't get back to us. The Allies kept them going the other way, and they didn't get back to us. So, of course, we could see all the bombers going toward Germany, all the planes, and see a dogfight going on up there, things of that nature. So we stayed with, the only people that really got homesick were the older people that were in my organization and people that had families. See, I did not have I was not married and did not have children, and those, it was hard on those people.
Very hard.
So we went on.
Before we jump on out into the battlefront, had others of the Crawford County men made staff sergeants and so on like you had? Had they kept up the rank with you, or can you tell us any details about any of the other people, what they did? Those names.
Everybody had some increment in their increase. Those who were in charge of, like, I was in charge of the surgical division here, and I was a staff sergeant. The one in charge of the medical division was a staff sergeant, and he might be from Crawford County or some other place, or somebody working in the X-ray room with the X-ray technician there. He might be a corporal, and so everybody was moving along because the organization called for so many captains, so many colonels, so many lieutenant colonels, so many captains, so many majors, so many lieutenants, and then so many enlisted men then, and it called. And they had one which was the top sergeant, #1, and you had sergeant major, which was in charge of administrative paperwork and this sort of thing.
How many people were, including the doctors and the enlisted men, how many did it take to make up the 67th Evacuation Hospital Unit?
About 200.
Is that right? So there was a good-sized little group to be moving.
Yes, it was. But it wasn't so big. What you didn't get to know everybody. People who were working in the motor pool, truck drivers. We got to know those people even though we were in something else over here. And so when we have Army reunions, people from the motor pool, surgery, people in administration, they all come together and we just know everybody by name.
Well, that helped you to deal with that.
Yes, it did. And having some camaraderie like Graham and Blaylock and Brownlee and Bryant and Kibler, and there's a man named Spoon and a man named Lakey from Dyer. Those are all, they say, if you heard anything from home, did you get the press Argus, or hey, you know what I read in the Federal Argus, so and so.
Yeah.
So we were in contact with back here in Crawford
The
County.
nearest to family that you had.
Yes.
Right at that time.
That's the closest thing we had to the family.
So you were leapfrogging across the battle behind the troops.
Mhm.
Did you cross France into Germany?
Yes.
Go ahead and lead us through this.
Went into the edge of Germany, and of course it's where the front line was going, you know, just kept moving forward with it, some of the countries, and we went into Luxembourg and to Belgium, Germany, Czechoslovakia, spell that.
Oh, yeah.
I'd even forgotten how to spell it. I had to look it up. And so then back through France again, you know, and back. Those are about the countries that we ran.
What were some of the worst battles that you had to treat the wounded?
The worst thing that happened to us, I think, was when the Germans launched their Battle of the Bulge,
Yeah.
and we were right close to the front lines, and we were in a town, Bastogne, but it was one there close, and we were set up in a boys' school. It had been a boys' school, and had a wall all around it where the boys stayed inside while going to school. And we noticed outside that all civilians were going one direction, just hordes of them going direction. And we went out there and asked, what's happening out there? And said, well, the Germans are breaking through it and they're coming this way. And all the civilians were going that way to get out. Well, it wasn't long until the orders came down that the Germans were heading in our direction. We need to move out. So the colonel came to me and he said, Blaylock, I need 7 men to stay here with the ones that are so seriously injured they can't be moved. We had those, you know. You wouldn't even go turn. They just walk in and shoot them. The Germans would.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, I'll be the first one to volunteer, and I'll get 6 men with me. And I looked for a single man to stay with me. I got 5. I made 6, and I drafted 1. He never did like me after that, but we stayed there anyway. And they loaded on the trucks then that we had those who could anyway sit up or even lay on a stretcher. You could put the stretcher across from one row of seats to the other. The stretchers just fit in there. You put them in there, then you'd put a row under them, and like this. And they went, but they didn't go back down the main Autobahn because the Germans were too close. They went back over the hills like you would go from Mountainburg to Fayetteville, and you go through Bidville and Lock and up through those
back
roads.
roads.
That's the way we went back. They went back through that direction. And knowing that they were going to, all evident was the Germans were going to overrun us there. I went out in the back and dug a hole and buried all the souvenirs I collected. I didn't want to find any on me. And then the next afternoon, the battle lines had stalled. The next afternoon, the trucks came back in and said, we're going to take the rest of them, whether they're able to go or not. You can either stay here and be shot, or you take them out, and we're going to take them out. So they're more seriously wounded and so forth. We loaded them on the truck, and we got on with it and went back out through the hills the same way. One of the trucks, when he came in, coming in to get us, had a hole shot in his gas tank on the way down. They were Germans were that close.
Oh.
So.
Well, did the men, the seriously wounded, survive the trip over the mountains?
Well, I don't know if all of them did or not. Some of them might have, but after we got back, they went to some other hospital.
Yes.
They didn't stay with us. We went back to where we could find a place to bivouac, to a building to be in. We went back to Belgium, is where we went. We went back to Belgium and got away from the front lines and all. Until then, the front line, if you remember, General George S. Patton and all of went with that, and it began to turn. The tide of the battle began to turn. But the Germans had come, seemed to me like in some places they were 35 or 40 miles back against, and took a lot of prisoners. And then the Allies turned and went back the other direction, pushing them back, and they took lots of prisoners. But during that time, there was lots of snow on the ground, and snowed quite often, and you'd see bodies laying out, soldiers laying out on the field somewhere, side of the road, laying there in the snow where they'd been killed. And bad levels.
Did you have?
We knew how war was.
Oh. Did you have very many who came in from the front lines just frozen feet, frozen fingers?
No.
They would have gone to medical instead of
on the
surgical.
medical side, but they'd still come into our hospital.
Mm-hmm.
The hospital was, it was like a V, and here was the entranceway right here, right in front of this V, and they'd either go here to the surgical side, or they'd go here to the medical side over here, on this side. And so then...
Were supplies able to reach you
Yes.
out there?
Yes.
You had plenty of something to eat?
Yes, we had a
Clothing?
lot of time. We'd have frozen.
Clothing?
Yes, we had clothing. And they had all the clothing that we needed. And we slept in tents a lot of times with that snow on the ground out there. We just slept in tents. You slept with your clothes on. You might pull off your shoes or your boots, but you'd sleep with your clothes on to stay warm.
Yeah.
And if there's water in there, drink water, it'd be frozen the next morning when you woke up. And that's hard to do, just to strip off and dress if you had to in temperature like that.
Yes.
But we became accustomed to it. Lots of GIs did become accustomed to it.
Did any of those other 5 guys who stayed with you,
How many?
the other 5 guys that stayed with you and the one you drafted, were any of those from Van Buren, from Crawford County?
I don't believe there were. In fact, I can only remember one. I'd have to go. But we were all given the Bronze Star after that.
Oh.
Staying behind there. And I just, the word memory, I remember the one who I had to draft.
Yeah.
Didn't want to stay.
So that's getting near the end of the war. The Battle of the Bulge turns.
Yes, the things begin to look up for us and get better.
That was December and January, I believe, of 45.
I think it was. And by that time, I had moved on up into administration. I didn't do any work in the hospital anymore. And as I said a while ago, it was one of my duties to take a crew of men and go forward looking for a place to set up our hospital. It took a spot that was like, had to be close to a road so they could get to us in a hurry, and it had to be like 20 acres of cleared land that we could use. And there was we were fortunate in this way, there was a laundry unit attached to us, and they did our laundry and kept us supplied. We kept using the same laundry. You didn't have as much throwaway as items you do now. And you'd use the same things over and over, like wrapping up surgical instruments. You'd wrap them up in a towel, and then that towel would be sent down to laundry, and they'd launder that and dry it and send it back to us. And that it worked good when we were not in war. They would sometimes do cleaning or something for us as far as our laundry was concerned. And then in the kitchen, we call it kitchen, be that prepared food for all of us, plus the soldiers that had to be fed, the wounded that had to be fed too. And so that would probably be another 100 or so coming and going there. And the kitchen would make big pots of coffee in like in a 30-gallon galvanized aluminum, stainless steel. And just boil the coffee, put it in a big, like in a pillowcase, let's say, drop it in the hot water and let it boil. And then when I never did drink coffee in my life. I've tasted it, but I never did drink it. And then we'd have our mess kits and so forth, and go eat in shifts. And if you'd eaten, you take your mess kit and dip it down in a big barrel of hot water over here, and that's the way you'd wash it, take it on back with you then as you went. And since I didn't drink coffee, I had my cup there, and I just dip up a cup of hot water, use that to shave with.
Yeah.
a little home.
Ingenuity.
Yeah.
What was the capacity of your hospital? How many wounded could you really handle? You mentioned there were about maybe 100 other
yes.
wounded to feed.
We could handle 200, but we were moving them through as fast as we could. They didn't stack up.
Oh yeah.
And to get them right on back to a general hospital. Back to the coffee that we were drinking. After they take the bag of coffee grounds out, dump them out here in the ground somewhere, because we were getting coffee all the time. Well, the natives, whomever where we were, said, "Hey, we'd like to have that."
Oh.
And so what the people in the kitchen began to do, they would take that bag of coffee around over to the laundry and said, "Run this through the dryer, will you?" And they would dry that, and that'd be just like fresh coffee.
To those people.
To the local people there,
Oh my goodness.
Oh man, they would buy it. They were just so, they hadn't had coffee in years. So they would...
They've been under rationing much more severe than we had.
Yes, they'd had it a long time
much more
before
severe.
we had over there. And it was...
What rank did you finally achieve?
Rank? First sergeant. That was the top enlisted man.
Yeah.
And it entailed a great deal of responsibility. I can tell you
sure.
that it did. I remember one time that after the war was over, and we were living in some school buildings, waiting until our turn to come home, you had enough points. If you were married, you had so many points. If you had children, you had so many more points, like that, and they would go first. And the doctors and nurses got to go first too. They'd be needed back in the United States. We were in a school building there, and one of the soldiers
Which town are we in now?
I don't remember. We were in so many towns. I don't remember.
I mean, Luxembourg, France, Germany.
We were in. I believe we were in Belgium.
Belgium.
In Belgium at that time, and so we were just kind of lollygagging around, kind of doing what we wanted to, and waiting for our call to be sent back home. And one of the soldiers came down to me and he said, "Sergeant Blaylock, do you remember seemed like the name was Griffin, that was just recently sent out to another outfit where they needed a mechanic?" And I said, "Yes." Well, he said, "He's back over here." And I said, "Oh, how did he get over here?" He said, "Well, you remember he made a Jeep out of parts that he found and different things, right, and had his own Jeep." Said he's back in his Jeep, said he's drunk, and he has a gun, and said, "You know what to do with him?" I said, "Okay, I'll take care of him." So I went over there then. Hurley, that was his name, Hurley. I went over and said, "Hey, Hurley, what are you doing over here? You're supposed to be 50 miles away from here." And, "Oh, Blaylock, I just come over here to visit with my friends." He was drunk, And I said, "Well, you've got a gun there in your hand." He said, "Yeah." I said, "Let me have that. And yes, you and I walked down here and talked to the officer of the day down here." "Oh, okay." The reason they called me was he'd gone in the restroom, and there's another door going on into another, and it was locked. And he'd taken his gun and he blew the lock off the door. Who do you think was on the other side of the other restroom? Clovis Bryant.
Oh.
And he showed us where the bullet had gone through the door.
Oh dear.
It's one of our.
Oh.
Anyway,
one of those war stories you tell again and again.
So Hurley, he was a good mechanic, tall, slender fellow, and so I caught him by his right arm. He's much taller than I was. So Hurley, let's go down there and talk to the officer of the day. Start down the street. He said, "Blaylock," he said, "turn loose my arm. It might make me want to hit you." I turned loose his arm because I had him by his right arm, and I knew he was left-handed. So I did. I turned loose, and he said, "You just walk along here with me."
Good idea. Oh.
So I don't know how that.
You mean he built his Jeep out of parts he found on the battlefield?
You know, a Jeep might be hit with a barrage of bullets or something, and it put it out of commission. But then he was a mechanic. He'd find another Jeep somewhere or something, and that was kind of his sideline. He'd be doing that, so he made his own Jeep.
Would he have been from Arkansas, possibly?
Yes, he was more of a part of the other group. Besides the 25 that went from Van Buren, they were from various places in Arkansas, and a few from Texas, and a few from Oklahoma.
So the 67th hospital was largely Arkansas men.
It was largely Arkansas men, and there was where we had 25, there might be 6 from Oklahoma, and there might be 3 from Texas, and there'd be 8 from New York, and 2 from Virginia. But we had the closest knit group of good people in Crawford County. And but at that time we were waiting to come back home, and we were going down to southern France, Marseille, to catch a boat. I saw the Mediterranean Ocean for the first time.
I'd like to stop just a minute and back up, though. Did you go back and dig up your souvenirs?
No.
You didn't get to?
No, I didn't think about those souvenirs anymore.
The Germans breathing down your neck.
Yes, right, yeah.
And also, I'd like to know where you were when the war was declared over. When you heard that the war was over, where were you?
I believe we were in Luxembourg. And we noticed a decrease in planes going over, and of course we had some radio contact, and the Germans Air Force were surrendering. And we were on this large meadow down here, and just above us up here was a level plateau, maybe 200 feet high, went for 3 or so miles, and there's a runway on that. And airplanes were coming in there to surrender. German planes were coming, fighters coming up there to surrender. And the Americans had anti-aircraft guns sitting all around up there. And I remember one plane, German, was coming in too fast, and he couldn't make the landing. And so he gunned his ship and took off again. And when he did, they just shot him down right then. He just fell in. Because they thought he's coming back around to bomb them or something, you know. So that was an unusual thing. And
well, what was the mood? I know the mood changed in the camp.
Oh yes, we were happy, and the mood was going home. Going home. That was with everybody. It was going home. The Army, as such, I felt was good for mankind. It taught us to be disciplined. It taught us patience, and it taught us patriotism and the love for the country and love for our fellow human being. We learned to trust each other. And
good life
I wouldn't want to
principles.
Pardon?
Good life principles.
Right. And so we were checking to see who had the most points and this sort of thing, you know. But we stayed busy doing various items that needed to be done, packing up the equipment that's going to be sent back home, and this sort of thing. But the mood was a joyous time. And I always think of the picture in Life magazine, and everybody's seen it, of the sailor kissing the nurse. The nurses, that woman, the nurse had on a white uniform, but the nurses all wore camouflage suits,
they did.
just like the men did, enlisted men, but they had officer suits, equipment, and clothing that they wore separately. You could tell they were an officer. And,
did the lady nurses? Were there lady nurses that followed you all the way to the front lines?
Yes.
Were they considered What was their title? They weren't waves or wax or what?
They
What
they
did
were
they call them?
nurses.
They were
They
just,
nurses. That was the title.
they were
The ones that,
professional.
when we were in AP Hill, Virginia, there, the officers came to the organization, and the nurses came to the organization. They had been drafted from the United States, and they were sent there. Just they needed these nurses and doctors, and so we all stayed together. All our pictures now show pictures of the nurses all together and the officers all together, and
You weren't actually intermingling with them enough to tell how they were reacting to war, though, the ladies.
They had a good attitude.
They did.
They all had a good attitude. It was something that needed to be done. I do not know of any nurse or officer that belly ached and complained. And if you had something to do, you did it with a good attitude.
They had been nurses professionally trained before they entered the
Yes.
service.
Yes,
So they were used to blood and...
Yes, all of that. That was nothing new to them. And,
How long was it after the war was ended that before you were able to get on the, see the Mediterranean you were going to tell us about?
it must have been 4 months.
Oh, yeah?
Some of the troops stayed over there to be in control of
Occupation
the
forces.
occupation forces, and others were coming over that hadn't been in the war for occupation forces. But we didn't know, though, at that time, Japan had not surrendered.
Yeah.
And so we didn't know what we were going to go to Japan.
Oh.
And we were just glad it was over there. And, of course, what we really celebrated is when the Japanese surrendered. And I again, going back to my farm roots, when we got down to Marseille, and the rumor got started that we were going to have eggs, and we were going to have milk. Oh, I couldn't wait to get on that boat. I couldn't wait to get on that boat. And the eggs were powdered eggs. The milk was powdered milk. Milk was mixed with water. Oh,
Same as you've been.
where was that old Jersey cow? I wanted pure milk.
So what was the boat? What did they put you on?
It was a much smaller boat than what we came over on. There was about 6,000 or 7,000 of us on that boat going back, and you begin to get sick more there. On that big boat coming over, you couldn't tell when a wave hit you or anything on that, but on the smaller you could feel the wave. And it took longer to come back on that. I think it was like 14 days to come back on that boat. That was an American boat.
So you got to experience the queasy stomach of the sea,
Sure did.
along
Sure
with the
did.
blood of battle.
Yes, and when I'm going over on the Queen Elizabeth, there were no lights on the ship at all above deck. You know, so submarine, because German submarines were patrolling. I think I read one account that there were 800 ships, troop ships, that were sunk by the Germans. And that was a lot of, you didn't hear much about those people and those soldiers, and they gave their life just like everybody else.
They sure did.
They just say the SS Missouri was, because all of that would have been negative publicity for people going over there. It's like today, there's so much negative publicity by the journalists and the papers that if somebody gets a fingernail broken over there, they come back and tell us all about it and say, well, I wish my grandson's in Iraq now.
Well, give us his name.
Jared Scott Lewis. His father worked in the post office here in Van Buren for a number of years, and he's the postmaster now in Winslow. And he and my daughter are divorced, and he had married again, and so has my daughter married again. My daughter is a nurse. It's in administration. She's the administrator of a 200-bed psychiatric hospital in Houston.
Oh.
But she started at the bottom in nursing and went on up through the ranks.
How long has your grandson been in Iraq?
Well, he's been back once, so he's hoping to get that his unit will come home in November, but it's already been moved up once, and so November is the second time now that one to come home.
Did he grow up hearing your war stories? Did you get to share your war stories with him as he was growing up?
No,
Didn't talk about it.
after he went into the army, he joined the army, and when he came back, he and a buddy of his came by the house, and we talked a little bit about it then. I showed him my uniform and medals, you know, and so it meant something to him then.
Yes.
He said, Gramps, I really love the army. He said, I don't like where I am, but he said, I love the army. He likes to know what's happening next. He said, that's what they tell us. He said, we say, well, this is what's going out today. And he said, I say, now who's going to kick in the door? And who's the second man in? He said, I want to know all that.
Yes.
Well, he's 25, and 18 and 19-year-old boys are going to, they don't think that far ahead like a more mature. He's called Grandpa, let's say, something like some of the people there. So, but he hasn't talked much about it he didn't talk much about it when he came home. It took him 6 days to get home. When there's room on an airplane going, he went, I think, to England and back around and finally get back. But this was interesting. But going back, it just took him 2 days. They got him back where they wanted him. But he said, as soon as he got back that morning, that afternoon, he went out on a mission somewhere. He didn't tell us what. Of course, they have email and computers and all of those things today that help them feel closer to home, the family.
Well, which port did you come into when your craft got into the United States? Where did you enter the U.S. when you returned home?
Oh, New York.
New York City. You had to sail by the Statue of Liberty then?
Yes, coming in.
Did you?
Oh, yeah. Beautiful girl. Beautiful girl. Sure
That's
are.
moving when you've been in war.
Oh, yes. It is very moving. And because you know you're that...
Because what you've been doing is what she stands for. You've been upholding what...
As we came into New York and saw the Statue of Liberty, we watched for it for many hours, and when it came on the horizon, it was just a small little, like something you'd hold in your hand, little statue. But it get closer and closer, and as it did, that was just more dear to each of us. We were getting that much more closer to home, and putting behind us all of the carnage and the battles that we had endured. And so our entry into the United States as we came back was through New York, and from there we went down to St. Louis, and was where we were discharged in St. Louis. And at that time we turned in all of the equipment. We had kept one uniform and our toilet articles and things personal articles that we needed. Several people, and myself included, would send back home little souvenirs to our parents or to our family, and we were carrying any of them with us as we went back out of St. Louis back into catch the train going back to Little Rock where we took off, the little trinkets that we were carrying, they looked at those to be sure that they were not something of value or something we shouldn't back. One time I sent a German submachine gun home when we were over in Germany, but it didn't ever get home. The box, even though it was a wooden box and it had been taped with metal nailed shut, they still opened it, took out the submachine gun, and then nailed it all back together and sent it on home. What I should have done was to send one piece at a time, and then it would have all gotten home.
That would have done it.
Yes, but I didn't do that. But we came back into New York, and were sent on by train down to St. Louis, and we were all discharged together, got back on the train, and came back into Little Rock, and there's where families were there to meet their loved ones and their friends. And as I talked about my friend Clovis Bryant earlier, his wife was there, and I rode home with them to Alma
Oh.
when
So you two went in together and came right back
went
home?
all
Yeah.
through the war together, and then several others, like, people, Brownlee, I know that he came back, and, well, he did come back and get married. When we had our 2 weeks after we were inducted in the Army, we had 2 weeks to come back. The day before we went back, he got married.
That's
I
short
guess he just
notice.
wanted to be sure he helped her while he was gone, I guess. Yes,
Well, you were talking to me a little bit about that you not only treated our American wounded, but when there was space and time to do so, your hospital actually received some of the wounded Germans.
Yes, we were not mad at or unhappy with the German people or the French people, especially those people who had been under Hitler for a number of years, and they were glad to see us and would throw bouquets at us as we were going through town, or hold up a bottle of wine or something. And as we moved from one location to another location, they were very appreciative of us. And I remember one young man, and I never knew why he wasn't in the Army. It was in Czechoslovakia, or Marienbad was the name of the town where we were there. And met he and his fiancee, and we visited together and became good friends. And when we were moving out, he gave me 2 pairs of gloves, one pair of leather gloves, real expensive leather glove, and the other pair of woolen gloves. And I still have both of those here 60-some years later. I wear them in the wintertime for driving and put them back where I keep them, and just remind me of this young man. And I often think about he and his fiancée, where they are and what they're doing, how they get along in life. And some of the people that we met in England, made friends over there, I'm thinking if they're my age, they're probably deceased by now, and just wondered how they got along in life and how they married. Think of the friendship. But we did, if we were a little bit slow and there wasn't many people coming in, some of the Germans would be brought in to treat their illness. I remember one German in particular. He was lying on the folding bed, but it was an operating bed. He was lying on that, and he was just covered with a blanket. And I happened to notice that blanket was moving on him. It was moving. And I looked closer. It was full of lice, and that was lice in that blanket, a wool blanket. So we just took that out and burned it. And what we did with all those Germans like that, we take off all their clothes and burn them, and give them new clothes to put on, give them a bath and wash them, spray them, or whatever they need to do, and clean them up.
Their armies
They
were
were
in
just
such-
like we were. They were drafted into something that they didn't want to do.
Their armies were in sad condition. If they were that lice infested,
Yeah.
they were in poor condition.
Yes, they were. Lots of them would be wounded, and their wound would be wrapped up in either newspaper or toilet tissue. Should be round and round and round their arm, just to cover up the injury that was there. And we would take care of them just like we did American soldiers, and they were most grateful to us. And as we got over into the middle part of the European theater, we had there were some Polish prisoners that were released, and we had about 50 Polish prisoners, and that just worked with us all the time. They did menial work, whatever needed to be done. They were so happy to be free. And
They'd been prisoners of Nazi Germany.
Nazi Germany for a number of years, and they were so appreciative of the freedom they had, even though they weren't going home or anything. They were just delighted. Well, they had a free meal, and before they hadn't had food to eat when they were in prison.
What about the Americans that the Germans and French had taken captive? Did you find any of those coming that we
No,
freed and were
no.
able to come through?
No, we did not see any of them that had been captive, because when you went into the concentration camps where the Americans were, the war was over for that time. And so they sent those people to hospitals and other directions.
Well, Mr. Blaylock, I'd like you to come back to Crawford County now and tell us what your family acted like when you stepped up on the porch.
It was about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I had one brother was there. That was my youngest brother, who's 17 years younger than I am, and he was just a small kid at that particular time. And my other brother, who was older, was in the Navy, and he was not home. So it was a change after 4 years.
Did they already know you were coming that night?
Yes. Oh, they knew we were coming and how we were coming. Well, the families back here were all in contact with each other. All the Crawford County families in contact with each other, where we were and what we were doing, and how far along the way we were as far as coming back or any of the activity we were involved in. And so, yes, and we visited them. They visited together, our families did. And we came back with it. We still visited together and went to Army reunions. And they would be, of the 67th Evac would move from one, after the war was over, we'd have an Army reunion in Eureka Springs. We'd have one in Oklahoma City, one in Bartlesville, one in Hot Springs, and my wife and I hosted the group here, our 50th reunion. We hosted in Fort Smith, and it was a wonderful time that we all had. And since that time, they were actually drifting away and dying. And now, the last year we had our last reunion in Bartlesville, and there were only 4 veterans there, and there were widows and children, grandchildren, more of that than there was. And so we decided last year not to have it anymore, because we didn't want to kind of have a contest to see who's going to last the longest, or just 4 of us that were friends. And one of them comes from Kentucky, and one came from Skytook, Oklahoma, and myself made 3, and one from Little Rock made 4. And but my wife and I are going back to Eureka Springs in September. That's when we always have September. We're going back as friends, and we're going to contact some of the other friends that we've made with these people, like down in Texas. And, even though the veteran's already deceased, his family might like to come and just review. And we always bought lots of food. When we went to Eureka Springs, we went to the shows in Eureka Springs as a group. And we're recognized. And
well, when you came home, did you go right back to the same type of work you'd been doing, or how did you find something to do?
When I came back home, I realized that what is important in life is an education. And so I enrolled at the University of Arkansas and started school up there along with other veterans. Instead of starting in September, because of the veterans that were coming in, they started a group in November.
Oh, really?
And I was in that group that started in November, and went on through then for the next 2.5 years, I guess. I went straight through summer, winter, and all. Just kept on going because I thought, hey, I was 29 years old, I think, at that time. Or somewhere in there, I'd lost some time. And so then after that, it was trouble of trying to make up what I wanted to major in. And then I got married to a girl from Alma who had just finished. She was like 3 or 4 years ahead of me, because she went out of high school and went on up there. And
who did you marry?
Ruth Belt. My father had a grocery store.
Did you say Belt or Bell? What was her last name? Belt.
B-E-L-T.
Yes.
And so we both graduated and went back to Alma and taught school there for 2 years, and then came to Van Buren, taught school 2 years in Van Buren, and then started a family, and I went out in the business world and been going ever since then.
What was the business that you had?
Well, I first went to work for the American Can Company as comptroller. American Can Company, worked there for 4 years, and then they closed the plant, gave us the opportunity to move somewhere else. I didn't want to move somewhere else, and so I joined in Van Buren the Darrell Thomas Company, which was an fabricator of rubber goods. There were lots of furniture factories here at that time, and so the man above smiled on us for the next several years, and we did real good. And I retired in 1987, I believe it was, and just enjoyed the first 6 months. And then after that, I said, hey, you got to have something to get up for in the morning. In the meantime, my wife had died with, she was deceased with Lou Gehrig's disease.
Oh, no.
And so after I retired, well, I looking around for something to do, went to school at the University of Fort Smith for 1 semester. Next semester, I said, they had a course called auctioneering, auctioneering 1, auctioneering 2. And so out of the University of Oklahoma, it's in Sallisaw, the Votech School of Sallisaw. So I went to school at night for 2 years over there. It was just 1 night a week. I took my examination then in Little Rock, and been doing this for approximately 20 years. I've retired now. I just do freebies, you know, for the Art Association or for places like I did for the high school up here,
Sure.
senior graduating high school, and the Women's League and things like that. I enjoy those. Non-profit for help those people out. So
did you
it's
have other children than your daughter? Would you like to tell their names?
My son and daughter.
Tell their names, first names.
My daughter was Lucinda Lee, Lucinda Lee Blaylock, and she married Gary Lewis, who was in the post office here, and then later on they got divorced, and she had remarried a man who is a registered nurse, and he is in administration down in Houston also, in the hospital down there. And my son is Warren Darrell Jr., but he's always gone by Darrell. And it was not named after Darrell Thomas. It had to spelled differently. But and he worked he got his master's degree. They both have master's degrees, and he worked for 5 and 10 cent store